The knock on the door was measured, a deliberate rhythm that caught my attention. I glanced up from my laptop, breaking focus from the spreadsheet. This wasn't the kind of knock you'd expect from a neighbor dropping by for sugar or a delivery driver leaving a package. When I opened the door, I was surprised to see Marissa Dickinson standing there. Marissa, the wife of Thomas Dickinson, one of my oldest clients. Normally, Marissa was the picture of poise, always polished to perfection. But now, subtle cracks in her usual composure were impossible to ignore. Her hands trembled ever so slightly, though she made an effort to mask it. She was dressed impeccably, as though she just walked out of one of those high-end boutiques she adored. But her face told a different story. "Marissa," I said, my brow knitting in concern. "Is everything okay?" "Ronald, can I come in?" she asked, her voice quieter than usual. Caught off guard, I hesitated before stepping aside. Sure. Please come in," I said, unsure of what else to say. Though we weren't strangers, our interactions had always been limited to client dinners and social events. Marissa had always been Thomas's perfect counterpart, gracious, charming. But as she stood awkwardly in my hallway, looking like she hadn't slept in days, it was clear that this was no ordinary visit. "Can I get you something? Coffee? Tea?" I asked, gesturing toward the kitchen. "No, thank you," she replied quickly, her tone clipped. "This isn't a social call." Her words gave me pause, and I turned back to face her. "Should we sit down? Sounds like this might take a while." She nodded, and I led her to the couch. She perched on the edge. "I'm sorry for just showing up out of the blue," she said at last, her voice almost a whisper. "I didn't know who else to turn to." Her words faltered, her breath hitching like she was trying to suppress tears. "It's okay," I said, trying to sound reassuring even as the tension in the room made it hard to breathe. "What's going on?" She drew in a deep, shaky breath before finally saying it. "Ronald, Thomas is cheating on me." I blinked, stunned. My first reaction wasn't anger or disbelief. It was confusion. Why would she come to me with this? Yes, Thomas and I had built a casual friendship over the years, but this felt deeply personal, something far beyond the bounds of our usual rapport. Unless... Her next words answered the question before I could ask. "It's Beatrix," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "Your wife." It sounded absurd, impossible even, but the look on her face left no room for doubt. "Are you sure?" I managed to ask, though my voice sounded hollow even to me. "Yes," she said firmly, her tone leaving no room for debate. "I wouldn't have come here otherwise. I've seen it with my own eyes." From her bag, she pulled out a small stack of photographs. My stomach twisted as I took them, my hands already trembling. The first image was grainy, clearly taken from a distance, but it was damning all the same. Beatrix and Thomas sat across from each other at a dimly lit restaurant. His hand rested on hers, and the way she tilted her head toward him made my chest tighten with anger. The following pictures were worse. Beatrix's car parked outside a hotel, Thomas brushing a strand of her hair back as they stood close on a sidewalk. The timestamps made it clear. This wasn't a fleeting mistake. It had been happening for weeks, possibly months. "I thought you should know," Marissa said quietly, her gaze unwavering. "This isn't the first time Thomas has done something like this. But I know how much you and Beatrix mean to each other, and I couldn't stay silent any longer." My mind reeled as I scrambled to piece everything together. Late nights at work, business trips that always seemed to run long. Her phone, always out of reach or face down on the table. How could I have missed this? "I know this isn't Thomas's first affair," she admitted after a moment. "But this time, I refused to let it destroy my life. And I came here because maybe we can help each other." "Help each other?" I repeated, unsure of what she was suggesting. "We can't just let them walk away from this," Marissa said sharply, her voice laced with fury. "They've betrayed us. They've turned us into fools." I frowned, unsure where her anger was leading. "Okay," I said slowly, choosing my words carefully. "But what are you suggesting we do?" Marissa inhaled deeply, steadying herself before locking eyes with me. "I don't want to confront Thomas yet, not without a plan. If I go at him unprepared, He'll just twist everything around, like he always does. But if we work together, if we gather enough evidence, we can expose them both. Expose them? I repeated, still trying to grasp her meaning. To who? And for what? To everyone, she said firmly, her tone unflinching. Their friends, their families, anyone they care about. I want them to feel the same humiliation they've put us through. And if it destroys Thomas's reputation, his career, even better. There was more to her plan than just anger. Beneath her words was a deeper hunger, a need for revenge, something darker. I don't know, Marissa, I said hesitantly. This isn't really my kind of thing. She let out a dry, humorless laugh. You think it's mine? I didn't think I'd ever end up here, Ronald. But here we are. Look, I know this is a lot to process, but think about what they've done. They lied to us. They disrespected us. They didn't give a damn about how their actions would tear us apart. Do you really think we can just let them get away with it? I couldn't. The images of Beatrix and Thomas, so deliberate in their betrayal, were burned into my mind. But taking the step from anger to action wasn't something I was sure I could handle. Even if I wanted to go along with this, I said cautiously, I wouldn't even know where to start. What exactly do you think we should do? Marissa's lips curled into a faint, almost triumphant smile, as if she'd been waiting for me to ask. Hire a private investigator? Don't worry about that. I've already started. What? I asked, startled. Without a word, she reached into her bag and pulled out a sleek black folder. She slid it across the coffee table toward me. I've been tracking Thomas for weeks now. Phone logs, credit card statements, location history. I've got everything. And there's more. Photos, videos, enough to confront them both. I opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside was a meticulous record of Thomas's movements. Hotel receipts, restaurant bookings, screenshots of texts exchanged with Beatrix. Every detail was there, methodically laid out. Marissa had been thorough, painfully so. This wasn't some hasty decision. It was clear she'd been planning this for a while. This is a lot, I said quietly, closing the folder and placing it back on the table. How did you even manage to get all of this? She shrugged, almost casually. I have a friend in tech. Let's just say he owed me a favor. For a moment, silence hung between us. Then she softened, her tone quiet but firm. I know it's overwhelming, Ronald, but you deserve to know the truth. And you deserve justice. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Justice? What does that even mean in a situation like this? It means whatever we decide it does, she said, her voice steady and resolute. That's the point. We're not powerless anymore. We can take control. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of her words pressing down on me. What do you want from me, Marissa? Her expression shifted, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of vulnerability beneath her steely exterior. I want your help. Thomas trusts you, doesn't he? You can get close to him, closer than I can without raising suspicion. If we work together, we can uncover everything and decide how to bring them down. I hesitated. Finally, I nodded. Okay, I'll help you. At home, Beatrix was as radiant and composed as ever. She breezed through our daily routines with the same effortless grace that had once captivated me. But now, every laugh, every casual kiss, every "I love you" felt hollow. It was all a facade, a polished act I might have believed if I hadn't seen the truth. You've been quiet lately, she remarked one evening, leaning against the kitchen counter as I loaded the dishwasher. Everything okay? Yeah, I replied, keeping my eyes on the dishes. Work's just been a lot. She gave me a soft smile, one that would have warmed me once. Well, if you need to talk, I'm here. The irony of her words made me clench my jaw. I forced a small nod, hating how easily she could lie while looking me straight in the eye. The first step of our plan was clear. Get closer to Thomas. That part wasn't difficult. He and I already had a standing golf game every Saturday morning. When the day arrived, I arrived early, my stomach churning with nerves. Ronald, Thomas called out as he approached, his grin as wide and easy as ever. You're early. Trying to psych me out? Something like that, I replied, forcing a laugh. We started the game as usual, talking about work and cracking jokes. Everything felt infuriatingly normal. "You've been working late a lot, huh?" I asked casually. Thomas glanced at me, a flicker of something, hesitation, passing across his face. "Yeah," he said after a beat. "You know how it is. Busy season." I straightened, leaning on my club. "Beatrix has been working late a lot too. Seems like both our spouses are busier than usual these days." For a fraction of a second, he froze. It was subtle, just a slight pause as he adjusted his grip, but it was enough. Then he laughed, louder than necessary, the sound forced. "Yeah, well, that's life, right? Always something going on." He quickly redirected the conversation to sports, but the tension in his posture gave him away. It wasn't much, but it was enough to confirm my suspicions. That evening, Marissa called me, her voice crackling with anticipation. "I found something big," she said. "Thomas has been using a burner phone to contact Beatrix. I traced the number to a hotel downtown. They've been meeting there every Thursday." "Every Thursday?" I repeated. "Yeah," she said. "And they'll probably meet again this week. If we catch them in the act," her words trailed off, but I knew exactly what she meant. The thought of confronting them, of seeing the betrayal firsthand, made my pulse quicken with both dread and adrenaline. "What's the plan?" I asked, keeping my voice even despite the storm brewing inside me. "We follow them," Marissa said simply. "I'll take Thomas, and you handle Beatrix. If we catch them together, they can't deny it." Thursday came faster than I anticipated. Marissa and I met in the dimly lit parking garage of the downtown hotel. "They're here," Marissa said as I approached her in the parking garage. Her voice was low but brimming with tension. "Thomas's car is parked over there, and Beatrix checked in about 20 minutes ago." Without another word, we made our way toward the hotel lobby. Marissa had thought of everything. One of her discreet connections, a hotel employee, had managed to get her the guest list and a spare keycard to their room. When we reached room 712, Marissa handed me the keycard. Her expression was unflinching. "Are you ready?" she whispered. No, I wasn't ready. I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready for this. But I nodded, swallowing hard, and slid the keycard into the slot. The lock clicked, and I pushed the door open. What I saw inside burned itself into my memory forever. Thomas and Beatrix were tangled together on the bed, laughing softly, until they noticed us. The moment the door swung open, their laughter died, and their expressions morphed into a mix of shock and horror. Under different circumstances, their wide-eyed panic might have been almost comical, but here and now, it was shattering. Beatrix's eyes went wide, her hand shooting up to her mouth as she scrambled to pull the sheets around herself. Thomas bolted upright, his face flushing bright red. "Ronald, this isn't—" Beatrix began, her voice high and desperate. "Save it," I snapped, my voice trembling with fury I barely kept in check. "I've seen more than enough." Marissa stepped forward, her arms crossed and her eyes burning with contempt. "Well, congratulations, Thomas. You've officially destroyed everything." For a moment, no one spoke, and then Beatrix broke the silence. "Ronald," she began, her voice cracking as she looked at me with pleading eyes. "It's not what it looks like." I let out a bitter laugh, the sound raw and hollow. "Not what it looks like? Beatrix, you're in a hotel room with Thomas. How else am I supposed to interpret this?" "Let's all just calm down," Thomas interjected, his voice steadying as he tried to regain control of the situation. "There's no need to blow this out of proportion." "Out of proportion?" Marissa's voice was icy, each word sharp enough to cut. She stepped closer, her heels clicking sharply against the floor as she pointed a finger at him. "You've been lying to me and Ronald for God knows how long, and now you want to downplay it? Unbelievable." Thomas flinched under her glare, but I could see the faint smirk beginning to form on his lips, the smug arrogance of a man who thought he could talk his way out of anything. "But not this time." "How long?" I asked, my voice low but unwavering. Beatrix's eyes darted toward Thomas as if she was searching for guidance. That small, instinctive movement sent another surge of fury through me. Even now, after being caught red-handed, she was looking to him for answers. How long? I repeated, louder this time. Finally, Beatrix looked back at me, her lower lip trembling. A few months, she admitted, her voice barely audible. It just happened. Don't lie to me, I snapped, my voice echoing harshly in the small room. A few months? You want me to believe this started 6 months ago? Marissa crossed her arms, her tone cold and cutting. Don't even try to downplay it, Beatrix. I have the receipts. Beatrix's tears started to spill over, her voice trembling as she tried again. I didn't mean for this to happen. Ronald, I swear, I never wanted to hurt you. I scoffed, my voice bitter. You never wanted to hurt me? Well, you've done a damn good job of it anyway. Don't blame her entirely, Thomas cut in smoothly, his tone defensive. It takes two to tango, Ronald. Maybe if you'd been paying more attention at home. Before he could finish, my fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling back onto the bed. Beatrix screamed, but I didn't care. Months of anger, betrayal, and humiliation exploded out of me in that single, furious punch. Ronald, stop! Beatrix cried, grabbing my arm in an attempt to hold me back. I turned on her, my voice a growl. You don't get to tell me what to do. Not after this. I laughed bitterly, the sound empty and harsh. And you, Thomas? You're not even worth the effort. Marissa stepped forward, her hand firm on my shoulder. Ronald, she said softly, her voice calm but firm. He's not worth it. Let it go. Reluctantly, I took a step back, my fists still clenched at my sides. This isn't over, I said, my gaze shifting between Thomas and Beatrix. Not by a long shot. I turned on my heel and strode toward the door, Marissa following close behind. In the parking, Marissa leaned against her car, her arms wrapped around herself as she studied me with an unreadable expression. Are you okay? She asked quietly. I shook my head. Not even close. She nodded, as though she had expected that answer. So, what now? I asked after a long pause, my voice raw and hoarse. Marissa's lips tightened into a thin line. Now? Now we figure out how to make them pay. Her words sent a chill through me. Revenge had sounded appealing in theory, but after what I just witnessed, I wasn't sure how far I could, or wanted to go. What does that even mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What's the endgame here? For me? It's about taking Thomas down. His reputation, his career, everything. He's gotten away with too much for too long, Marissa said, her tone steely. And Beatrix? The question felt like a lump in my throat. Marissa shrugged. That's your decision. But don't let her walk away from this without facing any consequences. If you do, she'll think she can do it again. I exhaled shakily, the weight of her words settling over me. I need time to think. Marissa's expression softened just a little. Take the time you need, Ronald. But don't wait too long. They won't. She climbed into her car and drove away, leaving me alone in the parking lot. The drive home blurred past me. The house was dark. The photos Marissa had given me were still tucked in my jacket pocket. With trembling hands, I pulled them out and spread them across the kitchen counter, each one a cruel snapshot of betrayal. Beatrix's face stared back at me in every shot, her smile warm and familiar. The same smile that had once felt like home. But now, it wasn't for me. It hadn't been for me in a long time. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway jolted me from my thoughts. I glanced at the clock. 11:42 p.m. Beatrix was home. When she stepped inside, her face was calm, too calm. It was a mask, one she wore well, but I could see the cracks forming beneath the surface. You're still up? She asked, her voice carefully measured. I couldn't sleep, I replied, sharper than I intended. She hesitated, her eyes flicking toward the counter where the photos lay. Ronald, she said cautiously, I think we need to talk. Yeah, I said, my voice clipped. We do. She took a deep breath, her hands fidgeting as she spoke. I know how this looks, but I swear, it's not what you think. A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Not what I think. Beatrix, what I think is that my wife has been sneaking around with one of my closest clients for months. Am I wrong? Her face crumpled, guilt etched into every line. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she said softly, her voice trembling. It got out of control." "Got out of control?" I repeated. "This isn't some accident, Beatrix. This is months of lying, planning, and betrayal. Don't stand there and tell me it just got out of control." Tears welled in her eyes as she reached out, but I stepped back before her hand could touch me. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "I love you, Ronald. I never stopped loving you." "Stop," I said sharply. "Don't insult me by pretending you still care about this marriage. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this." Her sobs began in earnest, her body folding as she sank to the floor. "I'm sorry," she whispered through her tears. "I'm so sorry." I stared at her, the woman I thought I knew, and felt nothing but emptiness. "You've already lost me," I said coldly. "The moment you decided to betray me, you ended this." She tried to speak again, but I didn't want to hear it. "Stay with your sister tonight," I said firmly, turning away. "I don't want you here." "Ronald, please," she begged, but I didn't look back. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, leaving her behind, broken and alone. The bed we'd shared for years felt foreign that night. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together, Beatrix and Thomas, laughing, touching, betraying me with every moment. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my haze. For a moment, I debated ignoring it. But then I remembered Marissa, her relentlessness, her determination. Maybe she was here to check in, to push forward with her plan for revenge. But when I opened the door, it wasn't Marissa. It was Thomas. "What the hell are you doing here?" I asked. Thomas raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, his face still swollen from where I'd punched him the night before. "I just want to talk," he said cautiously. "You've got a lot of nerve showing up here," I said, crossing my arms. "Say what you need to, and then get off my property." He flinched but didn't retreat. "Ronald, I'm not here to make excuses," he said, his voice low. I need you to know I never meant for this to happen." "You didn't mean for this to happen?" I repeated, my voice dripping with scorn. "You mean you accidentally slept with my wife? For 6 months?" "It's not like that," he said quickly, his voice faltering. "Ronald, I swear, I didn't go looking for this. Beatrix and we just connected. It was a mistake." "A mistake?" I snapped, taking a step closer. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. What you did was deliberate. It was calculated. And the worst part? I trusted you. I defended you. And this is how you repay me?" Thomas's shoulders sagged, and he shook his head. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I just wanted to say I'm sorry." "You've said enough," I replied, my tone colder than the January air. "Now get off my property." Later that day, my phone buzzed. It was Marissa. I wasn't surprised. She had made it clear she wasn't done. Her voice was sharp and focused when I picked up. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "How do you think?" I replied bitterly. "Thomas showed up at my house this morning." She inhaled sharply. What did he want? To apologize. To explain. Like that changes anything? "Of course he did," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "He always thinks he can talk his way out of things. That's his playbook." I rubbed my temples, exhaustion creeping into my voice. "What's next, Marissa? What's the endgame here? Because I don't know how much more I can take." Her tone softened, but only slightly. "Ronald, I know you're tired. But if we don't finish this, they'll move on like nothing happened, and we'll be the ones left picking up the pieces." "So, what are you suggesting?" I asked wearily. "I've been working on something," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "If we time this right, we can destroy them both in one fell swoop. But I'll need your help to pull it off." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. Whatever she had planned, I knew it wasn't going to be subtle or kind. I sighed, pressing my fingers to the bridge of my nose. "What kind of effort are we talking about here?" "Meet me tomorrow," Marissa replied. "I'll lay everything out for you." The next day, we met at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. Marissa looked composed as always, but there was an unmistakable gleam in her eye, sharp, determined, and unrelenting. I've been digging deeper, she began, sliding a thick folder across the table toward me. Not just about the affair. Thomas has been skimming money from client accounts for years. If we expose this, it'll destroy his career. I opened the folder and scanned the documents. Bank statements, suspicious wire transfers, doctor contracts, all of it laid out with precision. It was irrefutable. And Beatrix? I asked, bracing myself for her answer. Marissa's lips curved into a cold smirk. That's the best part. If we time this right, we can tie her to it. I've been looking into her finances, and let's just say she hasn't been entirely clean. With the right framing, we can make it seem like she was complicit. I closed the folder, my stomach churning. This feels extreme, Marissa. She leaned forward, her tone sharp. Ronald, they didn't just cheat on us. They humiliated us. They made fools of us. If we don't fight back, they'll walk away unscathed, leaving us to pick up the pieces. Is that what you want? I didn't answer immediately. The weight of her words hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. After a long pause, I nodded. All right, let's do it. Her smile was cold, victorious. Good. By the time we're done, they'll regret every choice they made. Marissa's plan was meticulous, a carefully crafted blueprint for total destruction. Over the next several days, she sent me updates, evidence she'd uncovered, targets we'd need to focus on, and strategies to ensure maximum fallout. The first phase focused on Thomas. Marissa had compiled a devastating portfolio of evidence linking him to embezzlement, tax evasion, and fraudulent wire transfers. It wasn't just damaging, it was career-ending. You've got connections at his office, Marissa said during one of our late-night calls. You can plant this where it'll hurt the most. And you're sure it'll hold up? I asked, still grappling with the enormity of what we were about to do. Positive, she replied, her confidence unwavering. I had someone in corporate law look it over. Once this leaks, Thomas is done. The plan was simple but effective. I would anonymously deliver the evidence to Thomas's board of directors while Marissa's contact, an ex-employee with a grudge, leaked the same documents to the press. The scandal would be unavoidable. The second phase focused on Beatrix. While Marissa dismantled Thomas's professional life, I delved into Beatrix's personal finances, looking for anything we could use. It felt dirty, combing through her social media accounts and bank statements, but the betrayal had hardened me. It didn't take long to find what Marissa had been looking for. Beatrix had used her position at a nonprofit to funnel funds into personal expenses, lavish dinners, spa treatments, and luxury vacations. At first glance, everything seemed legitimate, but Marissa's sharp eye had spotted the discrepancies. This is gold, Marissa said when I showed her the records. It's not just about the money. It's about trust. Once this comes out, she'll lose everything. I hesitated, unease prickling at the edges of my resolve. Despite everything, a part of me still cared for Beatrix. The thought of destroying her life didn't sit well, but Marissa's conviction was infectious. She believed this was justice, that we were taking back control. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than I expected. Marissa and I met at her lawyer's office, where she finalized the last details of our plan. Once this is out there, there's no undoing it, she said firmly. Are you ready for that? I hesitated, the enormity of what we were doing weighing heavily on me. Then I nodded. Yeah, I'm ready. That evening, I delivered the damning portfolio to Thomas's board of directors. At the same time, Marissa's contact leaked the information to the media, ensuring the story would explode. Meanwhile, Marissa sent the records of Beatrix's financial misconduct to her nonprofit's board, accompanied by an anonymous letter exposing her misuse of funds. By midnight, the headlines were everywhere: CEO Thomas Dickinson accused of financial fraud, and nonprofit leader faces allegations of misappropriated funds. Marissa called me as the news spread. It's done, she said, her voice triumphant. They're finished. But as I sat in my dark living room, staring at the headlines on my phone, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. The next morning, Beatrix showed up at the house. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen and bloodshot from crying. She stood on the doorstep, clutching her coat like it was the only thing holding her together. Ronald, she said, her voice cracking. Please let me in. I didn't move. What do you want, Beatrix? Her voice shook. I know it was you. You and Marissa. You did this. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. You don't get to play the victim here. You brought this on yourself. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I didn't flinch. Ronald, I'm sorry, she whispered. I know I hurt you, but this isn't justice. It's cruel. Cruel? I repeated, laughing bitterly. You think this is cruel? Beatrix, you destroyed everything we built, and you want to talk about cruelty? She sobbed openly, reaching out for me, but I didn't move. Ronald, please, don't let this end like this. This conversation is over, I said coldly, stepping back and closing the door with a firm click. Later that day, Marissa called, her voice brimming with satisfaction. The fallout is worse than I expected. Thomas's company is calling an emergency board meeting, and Beatrix's nonprofit is already distancing themselves. We did it, Ronald. We won. Yeah, I replied flatly, forcing the words out. We won. But as I hung up the phone, I couldn't shake the hollow ache that had settled in my chest. Winning didn't feel the way I thought it would. It didn't feel like anything at all, as Marissa reveled in the victory. A growing unease gnawed at me. It didn't feel like justice or closure. It felt like scorched earth, an act of destruction that left nothing behind but ashes. The fallout spread quickly, consuming every corner of Thomas and Beatrix's lives. By the end of the week, Thomas's company had placed him on indefinite leave, pending an internal investigation. Headlines splashed his name across business sections nationwide. Scandal rocks prominent CEO. His image, once synonymous with success and integrity, had become a joke, a cautionary tale of hubris and deceit. Beatrix wasn't spared either. Her nonprofit issued a statement announcing a full audit of its finances, clearly signaling they were severing ties with her. The board expressed their shock and disappointment, leaving Beatrix professionally exiled, a pariah in the very world she had once commanded with confidence. A week after the story broke, I sat alone in the house, nursing a glass of whiskey, when my phone buzzed. Beatrix's name lit up the screen. What do you want? I asked, my voice flat, detached. Her voice was barely audible. Ronald, I need to see you. Please. Why? I need to talk. Face to face. Against my better judgment, I relented. Fine. When she arrived, her once pristine appearance was gone. What do you want, Beatrix? I asked, staying near the doorway, arms crossed. If you're here to beg for forgiveness, don't bother. She looked up, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. I needed to tell you I'm sorry. For everything. I don't expect forgiveness, but you deserve to hear it. Her words caught me off guard. But they weren't enough. Not after everything she'd done. Why, Beatrix? I asked, my voice cracking despite my efforts to keep it steady. Why did you do it? She took a deep, shuddering breath. I don't know, she admitted. At first, it was just exciting. Different. But it spiraled so quickly, and before I knew it, I couldn't stop. I hate myself for it, Ronald. I really do. I don't know what I was thinking. I've lost everything. My career, my reputation, and you. She paused, her voice breaking. I know I can't fix this. I know I've ruined us. I nodded slowly, the weight of her words settling over me. You're right. What's broken can't be put back together. She slumped, my words hitting her like a blow. I understand. I hesitated before asking, my voice barely above a whisper. What was so wrong with us, Beatrix? Why did you need him? She wiped at her face, her hands trembling. It wasn't about you, she said softly. It was about me. I felt invisible, like I wasn't enough. And Thomas, he made me feel seen. I'm not excusing what I did, she continued. It was wrong. I know that. But I need you to know, it wasn't because I didn't love you. I didn't respond. I couldn't. That night, Marissa called. How are you holding up? She asked. I don't know, I admitted. Beatrix came by. What did she want? Marissa's voice was sharp with suspicion. To apologize. To say she's sorry. Marissa scoffed. Of course she's sorry. She's sorry she got caught. Maybe, I said. but I think she's also sorry for what she's lost. Ronald, Marissa said, her tone firm, don't let her manipulate you. She made her choices. Don't forget that. I haven't, I replied, though the truth was murkier than I wanted to admit. The days that followed felt surreal. Headlines about Thomas and Beatrix's downfall faded as new scandals filled the public's attention. But for the four of us, Marissa, Thomas, Beatrix, and me, the wreckage remained, unresolved and impossible to ignore. Marissa, however, thrived on the chaos. She called or texted almost daily, eager to share updates. He's selling the house, she said during one call, her voice gleeful. His company froze his accounts, and now he's scrambling to liquidate everything. It's pathetic. Good for him, I muttered, my bitterness sharper than I intended. What's wrong? Marissa asked, catching the edge in my tone. This is what we wanted, isn't it? I guess, I replied, but it doesn't feel like a win. Marissa's voice hardened. Ronald, stop second-guessing this. They betrayed us. They deserved everything they got. I know, I said, though the words felt empty. It just doesn't feel like enough. It feels hollow. One evening, I sat in the living room, flipping through an old photo album. It was from our first anniversary, a trip to Napa Valley. I closed the album, the memories too much to bear. A sharp knock at the door startled me. When I opened it, Marissa stood there, a bottle of wine in her hand. I brought wine, she said with a smirk, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. I followed her to the kitchen, where she poured 2 glasses. You look like you need this, she said, sliding one toward me. Thanks, I muttered, taking a sip. The alcohol burned, but it was a welcome distraction. Marissa leaned against the counter, watching me closely. What's going on, Ronald? You've been distant. I sighed, setting the glass down. I don't know, Marissa. I thought revenge would make me feel better, but it hasn't. It's just left me feeling empty. Her expression hardened. They deserved it, she said firmly. Don't let guilt cloud your judgment. It's not guilt, I replied, though I wasn't sure that was true. It's just, I don't know who I am anymore. Everything feels wrong. Marissa stepped closer, placing a hand on my arm. You're stronger than you think, Ronald. You don't need Beatrix or anyone else to define you. Before I could respond, she leaned in and kissed me. It was quick, hesitant, and over before I could process it. I stepped back, my mind reeling. Marissa, what are we doing? Her face flushed, and she quickly grabbed her purse. Forget it, she said sharply. I'll see myself out. A week later, I started packing. When the last box was loaded into the moving truck, I stood in the driveway, staring at the empty house. It had been my home once, but now it felt like a graveyard of memories. I started the engine and drove away, leaving everything behind. I didn't know where I was going, but for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. I was finally moving forward, toward something new.